Welcome to the True Restoration live stream. Today I'm joined again by Stephen Heiner. Thanks for joining me today, Stephen.
Happy to be here.
Good, good. We're talking today more about business stuff. People seem to like that. So we're going to take a look at business books, business quote-unquote gurus, things like that, and from a Catholic perspective. So Steve and I, before I started this show, I'm like, I just loaded my desk with all these business books that I seem to have sort of acquired.
As long as you didn't pay for the $6,800 bundle, I'm happy.
No, I did not pay for no.
There's
standard disclaimer for the audience. There's some. Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
There's a lot of blowback when Hormozi, I have nothing to sell you, dropped that $6,800 package. I want to say a few weeks ago, people were real upset about it.
Actually, I think a lot of people did sort of feel a bit. I've always looked at business people and gurus and stuff of like, I know you're running a business. I get it. It's just the value exchange. Each time I buy from you, I'm just, I'm literally looking at it as, will I get value from the book purchase? But I know some people who do sort of get right into it. And maybe this is something good to talk about is, I guess, how you approach gurus. People might start putting a bit too much faith and expect even probably a bit too much that's even fair on them as a person in business. I just want to give as well, because I'm like to be safe and stuff. Just disclaimer, we talk about books, these are by secular people. There might be things that aren't like fully Catholic, foul language, etc. Obviously, we don't endorse that, but we're just talking about the business stuff. So Stephen, I'll kick it off to you. Where did you want to start with this one?
Well, I think it's easier to start with because the title says books and gurus. So I think it might be easier to start with the books and then end with the gurus, because people will then get a sense of, we're talking about the ideas we're getting from each book. And I think that's always what's going on. And some people may know I run a YouTube book review channel. And my expectation 9 times out of 10 is that people who watch my reviews are not necessarily going to read the book. My hope is that what I'm doing is I'm idea mining, and I'm hoping to take those ideas, give it a Catholic frame, and send it out there, and for people to do what they want to do with it. So with each of the books that we're going to talk about, I'm hoping to take 1 or 2 ideas, and Matthew's read quite a few of them because they were mandated for a coaching course that he did some time ago.
This is one of them too. Yeah. you made me read. Yeah.
So why don't we start? I had mentioned this. This is not actually a book; it's an article, but I mentioned it in our last live stream. It's an article by Kevin Kelly called "1,000 True Fans," and I classified this under my fundamentals on the book list. And for those who weren't on our last live stream or who didn't hear that part of the live stream, the concept of 1,000 True Fans was conceived to help independent musicians think about how they could be working musicians. They didn't have to be a barista by day and musician by night. And so the idea is, could I generate $100 a year in revenue from a fan? And if I did that with 1,000 fans, I have $100,000 of revenue. It doesn't mean $100,000 of profit. It's $100,000 of revenue. And with the margin, could I then be a working musician as opposed to a musician on the nights and weekends with a full-time day job? And then he broke down the $100 even further. He said, okay, $20 for 2 concert tickets, that's $40. $20 for a CD. Matthew, I don't know if the young people know what a CD is. Might have to explain.
Actually, I don't know if I classify as a young person anymore.
There's this disc that you'd have to put in, and it would have music on it. You'd have to have the disc with you in order to have the music. And if you didn't have the disc, you didn't have the music. So you could buy a CD, you could buy merch. This could be, I think, again, for musicians, this could be a t-shirt, maybe a mug, maybe a bumper sticker, whatever it might be, and then something else. But by adding those line items together, musicians were able to see, oh, I could do that in 12 months. I could sell 2 concert tickets, 1 piece of merch, 1 CD, and getting to $100 actually becomes not that difficult. And then the goal is, I need to get 1,000 of these people. And when you think, you mean for a musician to be successful, all he needs is 1,000 fans? Yes, that can be applicable to anything. You don't have to be a musician. You could be a graphic designer. Do you get 100 people a year who have $1,000 workload with you? Or you can go even more. Do I have 10 clients a year who have a $10,000 workload with me? And you might think that's a lot, but realistically, things add up these days. Building a website, doing whatever, a $10,000 bill is actually not that big of a ticket, actually.
And even like going the concept of massive strategy that even like Elon Musk figured out is you start off by going premium because you can sell to people who just have so much money. You make so much margin off that, so you keep your business afloat really well. And like with Tesla, that's what I'm talking about. So with Tesla, they made very premium cars, only sold to really rich people in the beginning. And because they were able to use that float, that margin, then they were able to start making more affordable cars. But if they did it the other way around, they might not have actually grown it to what it is. Who knows?
Sure. And have some fun along the way, selling boxes of things that says not a flamethrower so that it could be sent through the mail. Irish Breakfast says, hi, greetings. Jesus Christ is King. Indeed, he is King. Irish Breakfast. So that 1,000 true fans, I really encourage people to look at that and think about that in terms of what it is you're building. You could even have a traditional business. Let's say you have a plumbing business. How many true clients do you need in terms of service calls and new clients in order to get to the number you want? He just made $100,000 up as a number, but maybe that's not your number. Maybe it's 50,000. Maybe it's 200,000. But whatever it is, calculate the true fans you need and work towards that based on your average ticket. And that's a key concept for any business. 1,000 true fans, Google it. It's a 20-page article. It's a paradigm changer. Wouldn't you say, Matthew?
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, what you said, this is a bit of a left field comment, but just so I'm not repeating the value that you gave. Something I've sort of had to learn a lot is becoming more strategic. And instead of just my strategy, being, let's do things to make money, that, like what you said, what's the goal that I need? I.e., what's the number? And then work backwards. What are different variables that we can do? You can just put together like a basic spreadsheet. I think that's a core component there. Figuring out what you actually need first, then working backwards. How many true fans do you need? How much do you need to charge them? I think that principle is good to have in business as well.
So this is going in alphabetical order, and so we're in numbers in the fundamental section. And the first book in the fundamental section, apart from 1,000 True Fans, is The 7-Day Startup by Dan Norris. Now, Dan Norris actually lives in Australia. And in fact, I think his brewery that he owns is in Brisbane, and I've been to it, just by coincidence. But there's a corresponding book called The $100 Startup by Chris Guillebeau. But the idea behind both of these books is the same. You don't have to spend a lot of money to start up a business. You can simply iterate on an idea. In fact, you can pre-sell it. I know a gentleman who did that with leather-bound notebooks on Kickstarter. He did a proof of concept leather-bound notebook using some scrap leather and some paper that he had milled. And he put it on a Kickstarter and said, if I sell $2,000 worth of these, then I can place a bulk order. And he did. So he spent $0. He made a proof of concept. He put up a Kickstarter. Kickstarter doesn't charge you anything just to put something up. They do take a cut of whatever you end up raising. But he created the demand and then he fulfilled the product. So the 7-Day Startup underlines that same idea of don't get daunted by, it's going to cost me so much to build this business. What's the MVP that you can pull off? And maybe, Matthew, for those who don't know, what's an MVP?
Yeah, it's a minimum viable product. So it's a fancy way of saying the product that you intend to put out in the most lean, bare bones, minimal investment form, just enough.
No frills.
So that people, no thrills. Just enough, really, I would say, so that you portray what your value proposition is to validate, do people want to solve the problem that in the way that your product claims or intends to solve it? And validated.
Yeah, and Tim Ferriss has talked about this before. A pre-MVP is creating a landing page that allows people to check out, but it doesn't charge their card. So they've had to simulate all of the functions of actually going through and purchasing. And if you get 10 completed checkout orders and the message they get, sorry, we're actually not taking orders at this time, but would you like to be emailed if we do move forward? You've captured 10 people and you think, okay, well, 10 people at this amount, could I do this, etc. it's a pre-validation even. So that's an idea behind the MVP. Do I even want to create the MVP? You can do a landing page to figure out if you even want to do the MVP, and you describe the MVP, you could say. Maybe it's an industrial product that has more cost to make, and so you need something like that. So that's the 7-Day Startup by Dan Norris.
Really good.
So the next, in alphabetical order again, Built to Sell by John Warrilow. I know, Matthew, you really like this book. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Trying to remember, I've read so many of these books. This was the one. Oh, okay. I think I remember.
It's written as a story. The graphic designer.
Oh, yes, that was an excellent book. Yes. So the idea behind this, what this is saying is, do you really want to start a business which really just becomes a stressful job, which isn't really a business? Or do you want to build a business that becomes an asset that you can actually put out into the business marketplace whenever you want and sell off the asset instead of being a slave to your business? You can palm this thing off and make way more money, like from even a big sale of your business.
And he used the frame of a graphic designer because graphic designers are versatile. They can do all sorts of things, but he zeroed in on what is repeatable, what is something I can teach other people to do, and what is in demand in the marketplace. And one of them was logo creation. And so they created a logo product that was this much. And then he was able to hire other people who weren't necessarily graphic designers, but who could help execute other bits of the design. And it became a process. And he turned away work that didn't fall into, I think he created a 3-legged stool of business. And that's a classic paradigm. What are 3 different products or services that your business offers? One of them will probably be the strongest, but you need other streams of income. You can't just depend on one line of revenue. And so I remember strongly, I think business logos was one of the legs of the stool, and maybe another was website design. But in any case, as Matthew said, if it's built to sell, it means you're not just owning a job, you're owning a business, something that will pay you all the way through and then cash you out at the end. And that's a wonderful thing that makes a business even more powerful than a job. Next in order is the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And I don't know if I ever told you this, Matthew, but for some reason or another, maybe it was an anniversary of my business sale, but I remember quoting saying, I don't know if I would have sold my business in relation to, I don't know if I would have sold my business if I hadn't read Michael Gerber's Built to Sell. Michael Gerber ends up retweeting this. And I remember thinking, wow, this man who had such an influence on my life. Irish Breakfast is a bit confused. My apologies. How is this related to living a Catholic life? No apologies needed, Irish Breakfast. It's listed on the title of the live stream, Biz, Books, and Gurus, Catholic Take. And this is maybe the 5th or the 6th in a series talking about the ownership that Catholics can have if they own a business instead of just having a job. If you have a job, you're subject to certain rules and certain ceilings of income, which then will have effects on how you raise a Catholic family. But if you own a business, there is no ceiling on your income. It's a question of putting systems in place so that you can spend more time with your family. Spending more time with your family is integral to living a Catholic life. So I hope you can follow us all the way around the merry-go-round. And so if you follow that, then we have to explain how to do that. And we can't just tell people, go start a business and leave them on their own. So that's what we're trying to do, is giving people tools to follow what we're suggesting. So E-Myth Revisited, as I said, I bit fanboyed out when Michael Gerber retweeted my tweet. But this is a fundamental business book. And of all the books we're going to talk about today, it is the most important book that you would need, because it sets a framework for how a business owner interacts. And there are 3 hats. Once again, it's a story. A lot of times business books know they could be boring if they just give you a bunch of facts. So he tells us a story, just like Built to Sell actually did. And it's a girl who makes blueberry pies, and she's very good at making blueberry pies. So all her friends and family says, you should start a blueberry pie shop. And of course she does, but this is her job as the technician. The technician is the person who executes the thing. But is she hoping to just own a business in which she just works making blueberry pies all the time? No, she needs to hire other people to make blueberry pies, that's where she has that manager hat. The manager manages other specialists who make blueberry pies. But that means she has to train them. She has to manage them. She has to manage their personalities. And Matthew has experienced this as a business owner and as a dad, that those lessons carry over. Managing children is like managing employees, and managing employees is like managing children. They have different temperaments. They have different things that motivate them. And you can't just do a one size fits all. That's bad in parenting, and it's bad as an employer. And so the manager hat is simply a intermediate hat to get to the top hat. The top hat is the strategist, the entrepreneur. And Gerber calls this working on your business instead of working in your business. In your business is the technician. And you can fool yourself in early stages of business because you're really busy. And that makes you think that you're being productive. But it could just be that you're hamster wheeling. And what you need to do is move through those stages pretty quickly, that maybe in the beginning, you're a 90% specialist, 0% manager, 10% entrepreneur. But over time, you need to go from 30% technician, 20%, or maybe even 5%, because you're just doing it because you like making blueberry pies, but maybe you've actually hired someone who's even better than you at making blueberry pies. And that takes the humility to step away and saying, well, is it about my blueberry pies or is it about having a blueberry pie company? So the E-Myth really encourages the formation of systems. And Matthew, I'm sure having built out the systems for your business, how that's so much better than just having to repeat yourself every single time someone leaves, you hire a new person.
Oh yeah. And SOPs, they call them standard operating procedures. And it's so you can these days as well, because of like Loom and just video recordings and stuff, you can literally like do a video recording, pay someone someone overseas to just transcribe it into a document. Once you've got something, or
dare I say, put the Loom into a GPT.
You could do that. Actually, yeah, you can actually copy and paste transcripts into GPTs. That's there. Yeah.
Oh, those poor overseas people losing work.
Yeah. I think they still do okay. I still, use them now and then. AI does have its limitations, so
for sure,
there's always going to be a market for things that AI can't do.
Yeah, my assistant is Indonesian, and my video editor is Ethiopian. So I am very much in the global marketplace myself. So E-Myth, Michael Gerber. The next one, also a story called The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt. Now, The Goal, once again, another story, is all about bottlenecks. And this is related to what Tim Ferriss says about giving your employees agency. So he would set a limit and basically say, if it's under $100, you don't need to come to me for a decision. I trust you. And even if you make a mistake, we'll learn from that mistake together. So giving your employees a net under which to make mistakes and showing that you have confidence. Say, hey, listen, if it's $100 decision, and I think, Matthew, we implemented that at True Restoration probably right after I read the book, and then just kept raising it. And when I left True Restoration, I think it was at $200, that if a department head wanted to make let's say, buy a software or buy something, and it was under $200, that they didn't need to run that up the ladder. Trust you as the department head. If you think it's something smart, we'll try it. If it doesn't work, worst case scenario, it didn't work. That's fine.
Yeah, I think that the goal as well, like you said, it's solving the bottlenecks. It's actually similar to the spiritual life with the predominant fault. Like, you focus on your predominant fault. And then once you overcome that, well, you're going to have a new predominant fault. So then you focus on that. And then after that, you're going to have another one. Now, the idea is that each predominant fault, your sanctity, if you will, like your effectiveness, each time you solve one, it keeps increasing. So it's not like, oh no, why would I solve a predominant fault just to have another one? It's like, no, your results keep increasing.
You get more weapons, more grace.
Yeah, exactly. And same thing in business. Like you said, what's the number one bottleneck? I think from this book, I listened to the audio book, and it was very that was the biggest takeaway for me. Yeah.
And that goes back to working on the business, not working in the business. And it will probably echo in another book that I'll mention later on. But how am I actively outsourcing and delegating? Am I really doing the mission critical tasks that I need to do for the company, or have I just failed to delegate? And I said, we'll talk about that with another book that's coming up. So coming up to the end of the fundamentals, Lean Startup by Ries. So Lean Startup, Matthew.
Is this? Oh man, I don't know how you keep up and remember all the messages from these books, Steven. This lean startup. That's surely like another MVP, like minimum viable product.
I think entirely making the case for
Yeah.
MVP. I think that the book made MVP mainstream as a concept.
Yeah.
And so the way that Eric Ries ties this into iteration is launch your MVP and then learn from what the marketplace tells you and then iterate again. So knowing that the MVP is just going to be your first try, literally 1.0, and 2.0 is going to come quickly. And maybe it's 2.5 the next time. And then maybe, okay, then it's a 3.0 the following year. So it's a question of launching an MVP, learning, and what they call pivoting. This is another business phrase. Maybe you need to slightly change what it is that you're working on. And I think I sent Matthew a link recently to a Melburnian Kickstarter that I supported. They're making Pomodoro timers, and they're working in general productivity. I think they graduated from university, and they're thinking, how can we make productive workspaces to work from home? Be a COVID-inspired type of business. And they were looking, they were pulling from their customers. What is it that you're looking? What is it that you're needing? And that's how they would do that. Now, that's not a pivot because they are already in the productivity space, so they're iterating different things. But if they ever found out that their customers were no longer interested in productivity, but were interested in, I don't know, case designs for their iPhones, and that happened to be one of maybe the case that they had designed to help people be more productive. So that was what they decided to pivot to. They could do that. So that's something to consider when you're thinking about an MVP, is be prepared that the MVP may lead you down a road that's completely different from the one you started on. And that's what Lean Startup Principles is all about.
Yeah, and don't be scared, just for people who are new at a business, like, don't be scared to do that. Like, the more you do this stuff and the more time up you get, I think the more detached you get to your ideas, and you realize that ideas are just dumb ideas. They usually like lead to stuff, and like it's just go with what the market's telling you, basically. Like I probably think the biggest thing is just be ready to pivot. Just know that the first thing you do is probably not going to be the thing you're doing in 3 years, or it might be like the beginning of it, and the thing you'll be doing in 3 years will be a developed variation.
For sure.
A more mature rendition.
For sure. Great question here, Irish Breakfast. We'll save it for the end only because I want to stay in flow here about what we're covering, and this is a little tangential, but it's a great question, and we'll get to it. Matthew, can you, I think this would be really useful for you to talk about pivoting within, I think you've had a couple pivots at Colossal, and I think it might be fun to just talk about maybe a couple of them. And so people can see in action what we're talking about in theory.
Yeah, for sure. And just for the audience as well, to be clear, Colossal is still a side business. I actually do it while also doing the day job. But it's cool, so still running that. But I think the first time I started it, which is, so what is Colossal Growth? It's a digital marketing agency. It helps businesses with marketing, and that can be website design, paid advertising, SEO, all this cool stuff. And so there's a lot of things there's a massive number of things that can be done in the digital marketing space, as well as a massive number of businesses who could be targeted. So when I first started it, I thought, all the advice online, I had no idea what I was doing. All the advice online is pick a niche, pick an industry niche. And I'm thinking, okay, I got to choose a niche. So I just chose accountants for some random reason, maybe because, I'm more of a white collar kind of person. I'm not so much into the trades. So I thought, that looks like a good one, so give that a shot. And, got some clients from there, really small time clients, but what I realized is that basically what I was offering is, hey, we will essentially, with digital marketing, what does it do? What it does is it generates leads. So prospective customers that the business owners or the business has to then speak with, follow up with, and essentially convert into sales. Accountants are the most introverted people on the planet. So, and don't get me wrong, what I did wrong here was, honestly, I was going for probably more the starting accountants and bookkeepers. If I didn't have my time again, I would go, if I'm going to pick that niche, I would actually just go straight for firms, like already businesses with different with like a whole staff. But I was kind of going, I'm small. This is a thing not to do, by the way. But I was thinking I'm small, so I'll go for other small. Terrible idea. But anyway, long and short of it was, I realized I'm essentially trying to sell something to people that
who don't like to sell.
I'm scared to talk to people. Yeah. And I was like, and what's going on here? You can still probably do it. I've seen other people who have done well in the accounting niche, but they've pivoted. They've done it in a different way. So that's when I decided to pivot the niche, and I pivoted niche a few times, even pivoted different services. Because I've always used Colossal as like a bit of an experimentation engine because it is the side business. But I think it's an example of a pivot for sure, and the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, and what I would have told you, so I'm one of my clients that I consult for is an accounting firm, and the actual problem in the United States is the lack of ability to take on new clients. So there's such a demand for bookkeeping and accounting that only the ones who are really looking to scale are saying, hey, we'll take all the new leads, and they'll seek you out. They're not necessarily waiting for inbound sales traffic from you. So pivoting is an important part of building a business, and it's not failure. It's not defeat. It's just saying, I'm moving where the market's telling me to move, and I accept that. The last one in the fundamentals. So I consider these the 7 books or articles that you need to read before you do anything else to give yourself a great foundation. You start with Why by Simon Sinek. Love this text. And Sinek he writes in the vein of the modern man. He keeps you entertained. He tells you stories. Chapters are short. And Start with Why is exactly what it is. You can Google it. There's a great graphic online. But in the very core, in the middle, is where the business starts. So let's use, this is on True Restoration. So let's use True Restoration as the model. What is the why of True Restoration? To learn and live the Catholic faith. That's the tagline of the business. And so the next circle is how. And in the beginning, True Restoration answered that first with the blog, and then it answered it with a bookstore, publishing house. Then in 2012, it wasn't a pivot, it was an addition of podcasts. And then that thing became the primary business function of True Restoration, even though it was simply one arm flowing from the why. So the why was the middle, learn and live the Catholic faith. How was podcast, what was formerly the blog, then a publishing house, but then the podcast gave it enormous reach. And then YouTube helped to augment that. So that was the how. And then that translates to the what. The what is Catholics who are engaged with their faith. That's the end product. That's what we're hoping to do. And when I say we, I said that the mission, I'm not in charge of True Restoration anymore, but that was the goal. And as far as I know, that's still the goal of the leadership of True Restoration now. So Start with Why, not a long book. None of these books in the fundamentals category are particularly long, actually. I can't think of any that are more than 300 pages. Can you, Matthew? I don't think so.
No, I think all of these. Maybe the goal was a bit longer, but apart from that, I think the rest were quite short.
All right, so the next category is called Building a Team. And there are 5 books here, two of the books are by Jim Collins. And I think at least one of which Matthew actually has in his house.
That's right.
Let's start with Built to Last. You own it. Why do you own it, Matthew?
Because you made me buy it, and there wasn't a Kindle or audiobook version available online. No, it's actually a great book man. Haven't read it in ages, but I think you'll probably remember the summary better than I do.
Well, all Jim Collins books are about case studies. So he has an idea, and the 2 books that we're going to reference, Good to Great and Built to Last. Built to Last is actually probably the sequel, but he wrote it before Good to Great. So in Good to Great, the primary idea there is it takes the same amount of time to build a great business as a good business. So why not build a great business? Simple enough concept, right? Yeah. But it steps away from the, that's good enough. Which maybe sometimes that's fine if you're just doing a repair on the bathroom that no one's ever going to see. But if it's something about the level of the floor for your shower, it might be something you want to invest some time in. So do I want it to be good or do I want it to be great? So Built to Last, as I said, is the sequel that he wrote first, which is how do I make something a generational company? not just something that's a great company, but a company that's talked about for generations to come. And he dug into the ways that these companies made decisions, audited their leadership, were willing to go through pivots. Very famously, I think, in Built to Last, Kimberly Mill, which was a miller of paper that was in their name. They sold all their paper mills. That was their decision. And they decided to get into other products. And it saved their business and took them to the moon. And Collins does this very well by taking these companies and looking at what they're doing. Now, you'll see some said contras on the web about, well, what happened to some of these companies, et cetera. The principles still matter. So even if the case study fails and says, well, this company actually didn't make it after Collins wrote about it, those principles still matter. And what's neat is you don't have to be an IBM to take a principle and apply it in your two-person business. It can still make a lot of sense. And so that's the power behind both Built to Last and Good to Great. I see them as basically a continuous read. So you could start with Good to Great, and when you finish Good to Great, start Built to Last, and it'll feel continuous because it's the same author over a 15-year period. In between those two books in alphabetical order, B for Built to Last, G for Good to Great, is Extreme Ownership. And having heard feedback from one of your employees, Matthew, I think at the time, said, Matthew's just read Extreme Ownership. He's now made us read it, and it's Extreme Ownership everything. I'm going to let Matthew take this one away.
Yeah, look, I was probably a little bit too sanguine in the implementation of Extreme Ownership. You kind of got to learn to tame your personal stuff in business. That's one thing you can learn from business as well. But either way, excellent book, excellent ideas. I'm a massive fan of it. To sum it up, the learning from the book is, whenever something bad happens, take the ownership and ask yourself, what could have I done better? Even if it's something super, super remote. So as an example, I'm just trying to think, like, let's say you run a business. Let's say you're doing, Stephen, you do a Palestine bookshelf. I think a lot of your books are around the whole conflict. What if something happens and then the whole conflict ends and then suddenly no one's interested anymore? So you could be like, oh, that's a bit of a, that's a big thing. That's something that I didn't influence that. Well, then the question we're going to ask yourself is, well, what could have I done to foresee that? Could have I seen some signs that, hey, this conflict actually might be coming to a bit of an end? So do we make business decisions around it?
If only that were the case, Matthew.
Obviously, it was not going to happen, but that's the idea. So in life, people will be like, oh, this happened, but that's life's fault. And now how was I ever going to foresee that? And this. And look, there is an element of truth. I think you can take extreme ownership to a degree that is unhealthy if you're stupid about it. Don't be stupid about it. Just like what I'd say is apply it with a reasonable mindset. And then the idea is, cool, that happened. That has had an impact on me. I could have done X, Y, Z, so I'm going to be more mindful of that in the future. Now what's next? It's very practical. It's a practical approach for moving forward, not for criticizing your past actions or inactions for no reason. It's a practical thing for your next steps.
I also find it to be a Catholic approach. I think that the secular world wants to blame people. So if something bad happens, whose fault is this? Fire that person. But always the reflection, and I think, Matthew, you probably feel this as a parent, is if my child misbehaves, the extreme ownership perspective is, did I model the correct behavior? Or what have I done that has caused this to happen? Instead of saying, it's that kid's fault, and I had no influence over that. It's like, well, I'm the parent. Yeah. What have I done where I can take extreme ownership of this situation?
Yeah. Or not done. One done or not done, absolutely.
Right. So if my children don't take the rosary seriously, could it be because I don't take the rosary seriously? Instead of saying, well, you should be doing this, well, am I doing that? So extreme ownership, I think, is a very Catholic concept as well. And as Matthew noted, as Catholicism always points to, moderation. The penultimate book in building a team is Traction by Gino Wickman. So this built on Michael Gerber's E-Myth. So if Michael Gerber is talking about the E-Myth as you need to have systems, EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, which Gino Wickman puts forward in Traction, is the detailed version of what Gerber is talking about. Get in the weeds and have scorecards so that your employees know every quarter what it is that you're trying to do, so that you can have a scorecard and say, well, are we working towards this quarter? Does this fit with your goals? So why are you working on that? That's for next quarter. We need to get this thing done. If everyone's on the same page, keeping score on the same scorecards, and we all agree on what those are, and he calls them rocks. So you have 2 or 3 rocks that you need to deal with every quarter. And those are identified and agreed to by both parties. So it isn't something you just dump on your subordinates and say, you will do this. Say, do you think this is doable? Do you want to do this? And then that gives them a chance to give feedback and say, actually, I think if we did this task first, this would be easier. So the entrepreneurial operating system is put together by Wickman. The criticism he gets sometimes is it's built for larger organizations. I take that on board. You can scale down EOS to whatever you want. I know an entrepreneur who runs an EOS Lite, he calls it that, and he just shaves off some of the larger reporting requirements, which would make sense in a larger corporate structure, and he has it for his 20-man team. So as always with the books.
It's a really good point. It's just, I might have to stop there with Stephen. It's a really good point. So I just want to talk about that. When people sort of start getting more into business, in my personal opinion, you have to start applying that problem-solving skill set. And what I mean by that is when you read something, I see this is why I'm saying it because I've seen it. People say, oh, but, like you said, but it's for larger companies, and it doesn't understand my situation. It's like, dude, are you an employee? Like, there's nothing wrong with being an employee, but that is really just employee-only mindset. In fact, that's actually like, that's not even as paid as well employee mindset. I'm just calling out for what it is. You want to stay into the business side of things, you need to start going, cool, what can I extract from that and apply to my situation? And also, what do I know to filter out by using my noggin? So I think it's just a really good point there for people who maybe starting to think about getting into business. You got to start really analyzing the principles and the elements and not just disregarding something because there's an element or maybe it was technically designed for someone else. You got to start being a bit more critical than that. And I've just seen that, so I wanted to call that out. It's a really good point.
And as always, because we're always looking at the Catholic frame of things, we're going to relate this to the lives of the saints. When you read the lives of the saints, you don't say, oh, you know what? I should start doing that tomorrow. In fact, every spiritual director worth his salt is going to tell you that's a bad idea. You need to consult with your spiritual director or your confessor before you do any sort of additional penance. But what you can learn is the larger lesson. So I'm going to think of 2 particular saints here that come to mind, lesson from there. So one is Saint Therese in Story of the Soul. She was so irritated by this one nun that she made an extra effort to be pleasant around her. So she would always smile, such that that nun had the idea that she was Saint Therese's favorite. And it wasn't until she was bragging about it so much that it was finally told. The confessor in frustration said, actually, let me tell you. So Saint Therese had so overcome her revulsion, her irritation. I think it was maybe the sound of this lady's voice or just the way she conducted herself. She tried so hard that she gave the impression that she loved this lady. And of course, she loved her as a sister in Christ. But what I mean is in a particular way.
Yeah, a natural liking.
The other is from St. Margaret Mary in her autobiography. And that autobiography is hair-raising. The penances that St. Margaret Mary took on are unreal. The one that comes to mind the most is her own desire to take on penance, and she worked with the sick. And I think one time she ended up licking up all the vomit of one of the sick. I remember reading that, and I thought, this is what we would call hardcore. And so reading the lives of the saints doesn't mean I'm supposed to imitate the lives of the saints. It means I'm supposed to imitate the spirit of the lives of the saints, which is, what is it that St. Margaret Mary was doing? She was crushing her ego. She was crushing it in a very muscular way.
And her mortification of the senses, obviously.
100%.
This is an example of when you go, yeah, look, you deserve a higher place in heaven than I do. I will accept that. I will have no envy. You deserve that.
Right. And you have to keep in mind, this is why there'll never be Matthew Arthur Victim Soul written anywhere.
No, that's a long way away.
It was famously said, I think, by perhaps a spouse, St. Matthew of the Warm Mattress might be the epithet for Matthew Arthur. But that's just something SP leaked. But the idea is, could I maybe not put salt on my food during Lent. You don't have to lick up vomit like St. Margaret Mary did, but can I do something like that? And so relating this back to extreme ownership again, what is it that I can do to control what's happening for me? So the last book in our Building a Team is 12 and a Half by Gary Vaynerchuk. That's actually one of my books back here, 12 and a Half.
Oh my gosh, it's a rotating bookshelf. That's such a good idea.
Sweet as, right?
Oh, goodness. That's cool.
And so 12 and a Half is about the emotional traits that you need to have as a business owner. You can't just be cold-blooded. You need to, even if you're not an empathetic person, you need to learn how to emulate empathy for your employees or thoughtfulness. There are all these other traits in the book. And so I would say some of the soft skills of leadership are embodied in this text. It's not a long one. And we'll get to Gary Vee when we're talking about gurus here
shortly. It's actually a good point. Yeah, it's a good point you mentioned, Stephen. Like, some people might be naturally more empathetic, but like you said, at least emulate it. I remember one of my old sales coaches, he was saying that his sales coach, when he was getting coached, his sales coach told him, look, can you at least just pretend that you're not dead inside? Like, just pretend when you're speaking with your prospects that you're not dead inside. He was so like, just no nonsense.
See, that guy needed to start with why first, right? You needed to have something that didn't make him dead inside.
Oh, God.
I actually think so. We still got 2 more categories to go, but I think this might be a good place to just pop in and pivot and answer Irish Breakfast's question and then go back. So, Irish, I think when you say, what advice can I give my nephew? He wants to study psychiatry and psychology. If he is someone who is influenced by data, what I would ask is, so what are the jobs that are available for that? As far as I know, at least in the United States, it may be different in Australia or the UK. No, and it's not different in the UK. You need to have a master's degree to even be employed in the field. So you'd have to plan for 5 to 6 years of education. Then how many people are applying for those jobs and what does it pay? And then chart the path, especially in America, if he has to self-fund that, how many years is it going to take him to pay back? So if I'm just going to make up numbers, let's say it's going to cost $150,000 for the education and he gets paid an average of $30,000 a year. With regular expenses, he can maybe put $5,000 towards the debt and he's going to be in debt 30 years or something. Probably not a good financial investment. So on the opposite side of what is it that I'd like to study and want to study, there's the practical idea of, well, if you were wealthy and money wasn't an object, you can study whatever you want. But if you're a regular human, like most of us, you're going to have to pay bills, and paying bills requires making money. And that means going to a field. And that's why there's a lot of art history master's degree holders who work at Starbucks, because no one ever asked them, what do you do with a master's in art history? And they didn't even know the answer to that. They just, well, that's what I'd like to study. Great. So you're independently wealthy then? No. So I think these are the questions I would pose to the nephew. I don't know anything about him or the context. If you'd like, you can maybe give a bit more context. But I would really push the practical side of this. So what jobs are available? How much do they pay? And how many people are applying for those jobs? Have you talked to anyone in those fields who've recently come out? Not someone who's been a psychologist for 20 years. Someone who's tried to get into the field recently and will tell you, yes, you should do this. And here are some ideas. Or if I had to do it all over again, mate, wouldn't do it. And those are the people I would be asking. You don't have, unless you have a background in psychiatry, psychology, you're not the mentor. So you need to direct him to ask somebody who could give him some feedback.
I think some of the question, I think what might have also been behind the question was, is the studying psychiatry and psychology from a Catholic perspective, is that is that actually Catholic compatible in terms of a subject? I think that
Yeah, I think that's a follow-up there. Some younger people think they'll be able to help others by studying psychology, very difficult field. Once again, I'm not even going to deal with that argument. I'm going to ask, can you make money doing that? Or are you independently wealthy so you can afford to help people for free? So and Bishop Sanborn has talked about this before. Sometimes people don't have a theological problem or a spiritual problem. They have a psychological problem. And sometimes it is something They think their mother's a monster or whatever else, and they have to talk that out with somebody. Sometimes that's a priest. Sometimes a priest will refer that out. So the idea that psychiatry or psychology has no value, I don't think that's true, but that's not the argument I'm making, especially we're not going to make that argument on a business books episode. We're going to say, what is the practical sense behind it? Are you going to be able to get a job? How much is it going to cost you to get the degree or the certification? And how much will you have to pay at the end of it? If you're in Europe where lots of degrees are free, maybe there's an easier path. So these fields would deviate from the Catholic faith, lead him astray. I told him to talk with the priest for direction. So Irish, that's not true insofar as there are Catholic psychologists, and Bishop Sandmore has addressed this in numerous live streams. So it's not true on its own. And again, I don't think that's the argument to make. I don't think the argument is don't get into this field because it deviates from the Catholic faith. The argument is this practical? Is this a practical thing? Because I know that we have people who benefited people. And marriage counseling falls into the same category. There are people who help people with their marriages to stay together. That's certainly a Catholic thing to do, but it is something you get educated for in the secular world. So when you talk about psychiatry, it could be marriage counseling as well.
Yeah, I think though, like the logic is good. Saying speak to a trusted priest for direction around that question is the appropriate
100%,
at least from that particular angle. But yes, just to echo what Steven said about the practical side of things, the fact is, and this is coming from someone who went to about $45,000 in debt, which actually isn't much. Australia's must be, not compared to the US anyway. I've almost paid it off, which is amazing. But the point is, this is the point. If I had known like what would have happened as a result, like how much debt I'd have to pay, what it was actually like in the field, which I technically don't even practice in the field, I think I would have made a different, or it's very possible I would have made a different decision. And what's happening at the moment is that the value proposition of having a degree has decreased. So what I mean by that is, back to say 50 or so years ago, as I understand it, if you were academically inclined, getting a degree was a no-brainer because you were almost guaranteed to get a decent, high-paying job. You could provide family stability. Like, it was a no-brainer. Today is different. You've got inflated degrees cost way more in proportion to how much money you can actually make in a certain amount of time. So even just on a practical level, like Steven said, the math has changed. So I think it's really important for people to look at that, especially when they're younger, because they don't have the same wisdom. Like, let's say I have now, where I can look back and go, when I decided to get a degree, I did not understand what this was all going to be like. So I think Stephen's point is really good.
Yeah, and to sort of cap that off finally, if he goes to a Catholic college, it's under Vatican II, it would affect, once again, Irish, this goes back to the point I was making. My generation was already starting to understand that college was not the answer. The previous generation was told by their parents that, you could say the graduate frame, like young man study plastics. And so the idea was going to college was a guarantee of a good life. My generation was already beginning to question that. The younger generation, they definitely don't believe that. I think you can go across the world, Australia, Europe, and the United States, Africa, South America. They do not believe that going to college guarantees them a good life. So I'm going to go back to the practical thing, which is the thing that you can offer and ask directly. 100% he should talk to a priest. That's beyond your competence, right? So talk to a priest about psychiatry and how that can be applied in a Catholic way and whether this is something you should study. 100%. But I'm always going to go back to the practical where I can add value. This is why we're doing this live stream, which is, are you going to be able to make money doing this? Or are you going to live in my basement for the rest of your life? I love you. And if you want to live in the basement, that's fine. You're going to have all these chores you have to do. And you might never be able to get married. But the point is this practical? Is this practical? And then alongside of it, the theological side of it, which, as you said, send that on to the priest. Say that this is Catholic because they're speaking in the same manner, discussing a useful topic with proper language. 100%. And that's what I mean is I've met Catholics all around the world who work in this field, and they have to actually be sensitive sometimes. They have to then go to their priest when they're dealing with situations. And they have to think, how can I answer this as a Catholic psychologist? So we don't just abandon the field to the Protestants and the seculars. As Catholics, we're called to Catholicize every field of life. Catholic firefighters, Catholic policemen, Catholic plumbers. If we just say, well, there are these bad things going on, we can't practice. You can, as a practitioner, carve out what your practice is. You don't just say, well, I'm going to take anybody and work on any subject. You can build a Catholic practice. So I'm not willing to exclude a field entirely, especially when I know it's been doing good.
It's almost like saying, oh, don't do marketing, because there's a lot of marketing tactics where you sensationalize the truth, or you say there's, limited number when there's actually not. It's like, no, I'm just going to do marketing and just be genuine and be ethical about it. You can't...
What's his name?
Russell Brunson.
Oh my goodness. I just get ill when he gets on
I
the
actually
screen.
don't know. He's the ClickFunnels guy, right?
Yeah. I don't like that guy. I would not get into marketing if I knew Russell Brunson was involved in it. That would have been me. All right. So moving on to sales and marketing. This is where we get to Alex Hormozi. And this is the only Hormozi book on my list. I say it with a great deal of caution because I do not like the guy. And we'll get to that when we get to gurus shortly. But $100 million offers, I think, offers excellent framing ideas for what it is, what is the value proposition your company is offering? And how can I frame that from exclusivity to this is a one-time product available and I'm only selling it and at some crazy valuation. I have 5 more of those that expire in a certain amount of time, and maybe I have 100 more. That goes back to 1,000 true fans. If you structure it so that if I sell these number of products, then I hit my number, then you're good. As Catholics, we're always thinking about enough. What is it that is enough to do what I need? And then obviously beyond that abundance that can come from our Lord, come from blessings, come from prayer. But on the practical side, we have to iterate to what makes sense, what is enough for what I need. And you have to calculate for that. So $100 million offers, I think, will help you think more creatively and more abundantly about how to offer your products and services.
Just one thing I will say, just because anyone who's in the business world, especially even new people, this book and Alex Hormozi is kind of like a celebrity now. What we actually have seen in the past, like since this came out, 3-4 years ago, basically one of his massive things was like these crazy guarantees and and it's just insane offers. What's actually kind of happened is this thing called offer inflation, where it got to the point where all these, especially marketing agencies, would just keep guaranteeing crazy things even to the point where the market kind of got a bit numb to it. And they're actually finding now that things that are actually building more trust are things like you can see more about people's results and the business owner talking and things like that. But the principle is the same, because he's trying, the guarantee is to just build the trust and make people feel comfortable to proceed. So the principle still remains, but just a good example of how tactics can get outdated, but principles never change.
Moving on to the next book, The Automatic Customer by James Warrilow. So I love James Warrilow. He has a podcast called Built to Sell Radio, and he does case studies of business sales. And so we've already cited another book by John Warrilow, Built to Sell. So the automatic customer is the idea of creating automatic revenue in every business. And he wrote this book years ago before everyone got on board this train. It used to be, those of you who are in my age range or older, you knew that you used to be able to buy software in a box and you owned it. It was yours. And at some point, software companies figured we could just get money from these people forever by offering an updated version as part of the service. So you don't just get one out of the box, which you had to update all the time. Mind you, those updates were included for free. If I bought Adobe up to a certain version, I got those updates for free. Now, the new SaaS model is that you get all the software updates, whether you want them or not. They all get pushed to you. You don't get to keep a legacy product. That's a technopoly issue. If you want to go to my book review channel, I just did a review on Neil Postman's book on this. But for everything technology gives you, it takes away as well. You have to measure if that's worth it to you. What are the trade-offs of the upgrade? Well, by creating recurring revenue in your business, it means that you have a steady flow of income so that you don't have to rely on your sales cycle. Maybe some of you have a 30-day sales cycle, 60-day cycle, 90-day sales cycle. You have to wait for that, and you're running on fumes until that sale closes. But if you have recurring revenue, so this is related to a Catholic who I got to chat with over the weekend. He's an electrician. He was talking about service calls. And in his business, doing a service call at a $200 minimum per pop makes a lot more sense than being isolated wiring a house for 2 months. For even if that job pays $10,000. Why would I do that when I can just go to 10 service calls a day? and be done and be simple. So what is your automatic customer? And you can do that in any business. I think one of the examples he gives is with a florist, and you're thinking, florist, automatic customer. And he said, go to hotels and say, you all always need flowers here, right? Instead of placing individual orders, why don't we just do a subscription? And I'll just come and replace your flowers every month. So don't talk to me about how your business can't get in a subscription model. Think creatively about how you could. So Automatic Customer by John Warrilow. After that is Crushing It by Gary Vaynerchuk. So that is a sequel to Crush It. So Crushing It was even more case studies from what he said originally. And I remember giving this to one of my clients actually. And I said, you've got the perfect personality to do this well on social media. I think you should go on to, at the time it was called Twitter. And he said, oh, no, I don't really know what Twitter's like. I've got 100 followers. And I said, listen, just read the book. Trust me, I think you'll do well. He read the book, and I think he's got 20,000 subscribers, 20,000 followers on Twitter now. And he's built a nice funnel for one of his newsletters off of that. But it's a great book for understanding social media and how you can use it to build your business or personal brand. Along with that, another Gary Vaynerchuk book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. The title is the key. Each time you're offering value on social media, you should lead with value. So jab, jab, jab is value, value, value. Right hook is an ask. So that's the ratio. For every 3 things you add of value, you can ask for 1 thing for your business or for yourself. So that's the proper ratio. Jab, 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 right hook. Gary Vaynerchuk, he gives that example over and over and over. Made to Stick by the Heath brothers. That is also here. And it's got a Made to Stick cover as well. So you can see the cover.
Oh, that's cool.
It's actually got tape on there.
Is it legit tape?
It is.
That's great. That's a great idea.
Isn't it awesome? I mean, to talk about living your values for the book, right? Made to Stick. And my favorite thing about the book, I think I printed it out on more than one occasion. I probably printed it out for Matthew, but you can find the graphic online. But it's what are called success principles. So what are the things that make things sticky in marketing? What sticks? And it's success. So simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional stories. And then he just adds one more S to make it success as a word. But he walks through, they do, Chip and Dan are brothers. They walk through each of those things. So Made to Stick, awesome book. I call it marketing for dummies. If you don't know how to storytell, this book gives you, I wouldn't say a cheat code. It gives you insights into how you are selling yourself short on not being able to tell stories. It's often just, how did I build this business? How can I add value? That gets us to The Thank You Economy, another Gary Vaynerchuk book. And once again, Thank You Economy is exactly what it sounds like. How am I surprising and delighting my customers? If I keep the customers I have, I don't have to seek out a bunch of new customers to replace the customers I'm losing. So surprise and delight the customers you have. Actually, one of my clients the other day just put a photo up in a Slack channel. She baked this pumpkin spice sourdough bread, and she went and distributed it to a bunch of her clients. Talk about unexpected. And she runs a maid service. What maid service has ever delivered bread to you? The marketing she's going to get from her friends, her clients, bragging about how her cleaner baked them bread. That's guerrilla marketing. That's not, that's classic non-scalable guerrilla marketing. I love it. Thank You Economy at Work. And finally, the last book in the sales and marketing category is Zag by Marty Neumeier. So here, Marty talks about a concept I love, best or only. Am I the best at something? Am I the only at something? You can use this both for delegation within your team. Am I the best at this? Am I the only person? Those are the things I should be working on at the company. Anything that I'm not the best in, or I'm the only person who can do on the team, I'm overcharging my company to do. For example, am I the best person to write the email newsletter, let's say, and I'm not? Well, then I should have that delegated out. Otherwise, the company's overpaying for me to do it. Well, this also works for your outward customer-facing posture. What are the things that you're best at that you can sell? What are the things that you're the only one who can do, and you can make that part of your branding? We're the only, mobile detailing business for SUVs in Melbourne. Now you have this specific category, and it's sticky as well. This goes back to made to stick. So that's the last one in sales and marketing. And finally, for the personal development books, actually, Matthew, I'm going to save those for another stream so that we can get into our gurus and wrap up today's episode. So I'll let you lead us off with our gurus.
Well, I think, the first guru I think we'll talk about is clearly one of your favorites, Stephen, Gary V. You've got like 3 to 4.
Right.
So Gary Vaynerchuk.
So here's an example. Something I had to learn very early on in my business journey is 2 of my business mentors had failed marriages. And I soaked up business stuff from them like a sponge. But I never asked them for relationship advice. At the time, I still thought I was going to get married and thought that was what I was called to. And so I never asked them for that because they didn't have what I wanted. So for me, and I've only gotten stricter about this as I've got older, if someone loses a marriage, but they're telling me about how they have great business savvy, my opinion of them drops a lot when I found out their marriage died. Usually, and these are not people who are struggling. They're millionaires, so they can set up their life how they wanted, and they set up a life in a way that their marriage failed. And so they lose a lot of legitimacy for me. So Gary Vaynerchuk lost his marriage some years ago. However, I didn't remove any of these books from the list because those books still matter and the message is still true. Crushing It for creating a social media brand for your business or your personal brand, the Thank You Economy, Jab, 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 Right Hook. These are all lessons that work, and I can abstract them from the guru. Even before that time, the videos that he would put out, I told people he's very this world based. He talked about his dream was to have a great funeral where all these people came, or he wanted to buy the New York Jets. So these are all things that I couldn't relate to, and I couldn't tell young people, go listen to what he has to say. Your mind takes on the color of what you take in, and just like tea, you put tea bag in water and the water changes color. You can't watch Gary Vaynerchuk videos without being drawn to the world a lot. And so I recommend Gary Vaynerchuk books, and I don't recommend Gary Vaynerchuk videos in general.
I think it's good as well. We should have started this section off on, I probably guess, even how to approach gurus, which I think you kind of just covered there, which is really good. I think sometimes people can fall into this trap of, hey, I need to only learn from people who I really like and agree 100% with my core values. And then I would ask the question, so when you go and look up a tutorial on how to make a really good coffee, do you need to make sure that it's a traditional Catholic doing that tutorial on how to make you a good coffee? No. You just care because the person tell me how to make a good coffee with this coffee machine. And if they can do that, job done. I don't need to know anything about their marriage. I don't need to know anything about their personal life. I just need to know that this person is qualified to tell me how to solve my particular problem. And I think that's the thing to do with gurus. Now, what is the difference with gurus and, let's say, the random person online doing a coffee tutorial? People can start to get, I guess, a bit influenced and learn more about the gurus because they're a personality. So it's kind of having that right frame of mind of, I will extract what I need that's to help me, while also being cautious that this person's gonna share things about their life that are not congruent with the way I conduct my life. But that doesn't mean you disregard the practical learning. So I think that's a good approach you said there.
And I think that's the problem, Matthew. Sometimes those things can stack up so high that I can't, if there's an assembly line and 1 out of every 5 chocolates is defective, I can easily do that. I don't know why that came to mind. Those people know I'm referencing an I Love Lucy episode. But I can knock off 1 out of every 5 chocolates. Fine. 1 out of every 5 videos not congruent. The problem is when that messaging is so consistent that it's 3 out of the 5 chocolates, then I can't watch it anymore. Because I'm not going to watch something for 2 out of 5 good chocolates. I need 4 out of 5. So I basically only need there to be one thing wrong for me to continue listening when it's not explicitly Catholic content. Because I have to be very careful about the subtle things that are in there. The way these people talk, the way these people think is entirely this worldly. It's very rare. And sometimes you'll get a Protestant who will actually speak about some of those things, about, being congruent with his faith. And you think, gosh, Protestants talk this way. It's inspiring, even though they're not talking about the same faith that we are, but at least the messaging is correct, right? So who's the next guru on the list?
We got Hormozi, actually. So I think, I actually have agreed with you. So, I mean, if you said to me, what do you think of Hormozi as like a good person? Yeah, I'm like, I just like take some business.
Oh, I really don't. He really irritates me in his videos.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I could say it good. I mean, I don't know if any of these gurus I would be like, yes, I agree with their worldview. I just don't think any of them. I think, look, the thing about Hormozi, I'll chime in a little bit. So I think he's actually, he's really good at a couple of things. He's good at making money, and he's very good at communicating how he does it and his frameworks. I think sometimes what is also good about seeing the stuff is because he's so popular, you can almost like see what he releases, like a book, and then go, I know a lot of people are going to start copying this. So how can I maybe implement similar stuff or be different about it? Because I know that everyone's going to start doing it. But yeah, I think he's just another guy who's got some good business advice, but I don't, personal, like his world outlook on life is a bit weird. So not my cup of tea for that. But Stephen, you've got some views, so go for it.
No, he's so intense and aggressive, and part of that is useful, right? You want someone to have an opinion, you want them to have a frame, you want them to have an approach. I've always liked passing around the Jocko Willink good video. It's a 2-minute video from his podcast, and I think it's an excellent, somewhat inspiring stoic take on bad things that happen to you that are completely congruent with Catholicism. I didn't get my promotion. He says, good, more time to get better. And the Catholic frame is God's will is that I didn't get this promotion. What should I do next? Do I pray for a promotion? Do I work harder? Those things are congruent. So I love that. I love when I can take something from the world and it matches with my Catholic faith, and I can take it to the moon. And so with Hormozi, he's so aggressive about his ideas effectively being the gospel, and that everyone else is just too weak to do what he knows is correct. So he tries to undermine everyone else's point of view when we're just talking about business, bro. This isn't the gospel. This isn't scripture. It's just your ideas. I get that conviction. I get that excitement.
I agree with you. And I actually, I've noticed that. I actually think, because I got sick recently, and when I get sick, I'm like, I catch up on conferences, some business stuff. A bit of Hormozi. And I actually noticed, I was like, I think he's mellowed out a bit. I could be wrong on it, but I just got the vibe. I'm like, he doesn't seem as intense as he used to be.
Maybe I tuned out maybe 2 years ago when he was at his most intense.
I think he was at peak, and I think, I could be wrong, but I think he's even sort of said, like a bit too much. But also, and this is another really good thing I like to point out. Like, you could be like, oh my gosh, this guy is why they make so much money and stuff. It's like, they got kids. Like, there's a different situation. Like, you have to call it out for what.
And worse, he said that he doesn't want to have kids, which is yet another strike against him. Well, why are you married then? There's only one reason to get married.
100%. And I think it's just understanding that. So, but I think you can take stuff. I think the next one, Stephen, this is an interesting one, is Grant Cardone.
Oh no! So I don't consider him a guru. He is a scam artist. Grant Cardone is a scam artist, and he's up there. And how you know this is he talks like President Trump, who's also a scam artist of numerous stripes. But he talks about he's the greatest, and he's all these ideas, and he's the best at everything. And he just scammed a bunch of people. Go watch any YouTube video about Grant Cardone as a con artist. And he is just, he's terrible. He'll have a lot to account for. I have plenty to account for in my own particular judgment, so I'm not going to cast any stones. But boy, Grant Cardone, not even a guru, he's a con man.
Yeah, wow. I hadn't looked into him that much, so I'll leave it at that one. But I personally, I don't mind some of his sort of stuff around his outlook on sales and that aggressive sort of approach, but moving on to sales, I'll go on to someone who I
don't remember what it was, but someone had to pay like $10,000 to be close to him for a weekend. Like it was one of the VIP tickets. And now Hormozi would say, hey, if you can sell it, people will buy it. But you could see the whole weekend and people reporting back, like it was just him talking. It wasn't as if he sat down. Versus Gary Vee, I think he charges $10,000 for a weekend, but he'll come in and work with you. You come there and he'll do a strategic thing with your business.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think it'd be worth paying $10,000 for Gary Vee to take a look at a forensic look at my business, but not to sit around Grant Cardone for a weekend and all his. Oh, he's such a. Oh, he's so bad.
I wouldn't pay 10K for that. But someone who I actually don't mind in the sales world, in terms of, again, not personal stuff. I'm just talking about approaches and stuff. I don't know if you've heard of him, Stephen. He's a bit more newer on the block. But Jeremy Minor. Have you heard of NEPQ?
The Minor name I've heard, and so maybe it is Jeremy Minor, but only heard of. I don't know anything about him.
And he's nowhere near as like scale as Hormozi and stuff. But basically, I actually paid a fair bit of money for his coaching program, which was excellent. And it wasn't just him; it was other sales coaches. I got my money back using the approach in very quickly. But I mean, look, you could have maybe made the sales without it. Who knows? But I personally found it really good. He has a framework called NEPQ, which is neuro-emotional persuasional questioning. Fancy way of basically saying, when you go on sales calls, ditch the commission breath. Like, just don't, how are you today? I can't wait to take your money. Like, just ditching that. It's really emotional. So detached from the sale, but obviously wanting the sale. And just having almost a really good process for a really fast, effective, but good process to actually get the prospect to trust you, actually help them figure out what their problems are. And it's really just a sales way of doing things. And I think there's a lot of good principles. One thing I would say is that, and even the coaches, like when you come, the coaches say this is a common thing, that the people who are fans, who watch Jeremy Minor's videos, they start trying to sound like Jeremy Minor, and that doesn't work. Coaches will be like, no, you are yourself. You don't need to sound like Jeremy Minor. Just because he's made millions in commissions over the years doesn't mean you need to sound like him. That doesn't work. But I think the overall approach, personally, I found it to be the most, I guess, even just values compatible. I don't want to be shoving something down people. I don't want to be a hard closer. But at the same time, if there's a sale to be made and it can help the prospect, I want to be as effective as possible. So I think, I'm actually a bit of a fan of some of his stuff. There's something to check out.
Send me a couple of videos sometime.
Yeah, I haven't watched him in ages because I paid for the program a while back. But yeah, I should. Next one, actually, I don't. Oh, Chris Voss. I might move to Chris Voss, Stephen. I think
love Chris Voss.
Guru, but I'm a big fan of Chris Voss. I have to say.
I have nothing bad to say about Chris Voss. I love him, and he's actually on the book list we didn't cover. So for next time, the book he wrote is Never Split the Difference. He was a former FBI negotiator. He also created a masterclass, which alone is worth the value of the entire masterclass subscription. So you can either watch his masterclass or read his book or listen to the audiobook. He reads his audiobook in his awesome FBI negotiator voice. He was born to do what he did. So I love Chris Voss. Can't say enough about him. And he has a ton of really valuable free YouTube stuff that he's just giving value. He's just jab. You probably can't afford him. He has something called the Black Swan Consulting Group, where he comes in and works on your company. It costs 5, 6, 7 figures. So just take all the free stuff he's giving to us, peasants, and read his book. It's an excellent book. Can't say enough about Chris Voss.
It's about negotiation, but negotiation isn't just, I've got a problem with I'm trying to solve a bad situation, like you're almost in a civil case or something similar. No, negotiation is everything. Like, if I'm talking to Stephen about when we schedule a time to do a podcast, there's negotiation happening. Like, as in, it's not hectic negotiation, but that's essentially what it is. If you're trying to work with someone else and communicate to get something or achieve something, the negotiation principles come into play. I like him about it. Oh, you go.
One of the things he does in the book, which also is about pushing you out of your comfort zone, he talks about asking for a discount. So you're at the coffee counter and you say, so what's the Stephen Heiner discount? And it's like, excuse me, or what can you do for me today? And a lot of employees, people don't realize, are empowered to give a 10% discount if you just ask, well, I could do 10%, or could you ask your manager? It is very uncomfortable for most people to ask for a discount. Not people who are half Chinese, but other people, it may be difficult for them, right? So it's asking you to do something outside of your comfort zone, but you also get free money. It's really free money, and all you have to do is ask.
Yes.
And it also allows you to engage with people. So some of the exercises he's doing, and part of why it's in the personal development category, not strictly speaking a business book, is because you're going to develop as a person as a result of pushing your boundaries. And that's a Catholic principle as well. You need to push yourself. You can't just be satisfied with, well, last Lent I gave up sugar, so I guess this Lent I'll give up sugar. Well, you're just doing what you did already. If you already did that, then how are you progressing? Each Lent needs to be a progression. You need to do more. So if you're just doing what you did last year, you're actually regressing. So in the Catholic life, we have to be pushing our boundaries. So too in the natural order, we need to be pushing our boundaries.
Well, just before I wrap up, one thing I think about Chris Voss is he actually, out of people who are probably more Catholic compatible, at least in values, from everything I've heard him say so far, he actually sounds pretty compatible. What I mean by that is a clear example is when he was asked, would you even tell like a small lie in negotiation, like even to save a
great point. Great point.
And he just says, no,
can't,
never lie. And I think he also, you can tell, I think he must have like a Christian background or something, as in like Protestant, but he's very savvy about this. This is where he's more, he's quite persuasive. He just says, because as soon as you tell even a small lie and then your
destroys everything,
party identifies that you've done it, it is the worst strategy on the planet because you are cooked at that point. Now, I think it's deeper than that. I think he probably does it because he's been raised to
congruent,
not always tell the truth, but it's really cool when you hear this guy who's super effective at
very wealthy,
very wealthy, and he's just like, never, ever even tell a small lie. No, don't do it. And it's just really good because as soon as people do it, it's true. Like we've seen it, like there's some people who are good in the marketing world that say, and I still learn from them. And I was talking about this with one of my friends, is like there's a guy, say, in actually Australia who runs a really good marketing agency, or should I say really successful marketing agency. But just through being in this funnel and stuff, we've seen a few little possible white lies, a few little shonkies. And that just essentially means that when it comes, if we does come to the point where we want to actually spend thousands of dollars on a marketing guy, we might not actually choose him because he's shown his hand. Even if he's really effective, because do we want to work with someone who we just have that gut feel of like, I don't know if I 100% trust. And now he's probably still winning in some ways, but I've personally found, I think that things always come back to bite you. And I think we just saw that with the similar Hormozi launch where, even though I don't think he did anything dodgy, though someone I'm speaking with thinks he might have done something a little bit dodgy. But the point is, even if you create that perception, as soon as you create that perception, it can be very damaging, even on a secular level.
Yeah, and if it can be that way for little things for a nobody, it can be the same thing for President Trump. I pointed this out to numerous people. He's cheated on every wife he's ever had. And these are women who bore him children. If he can cheat on the mother of his children, but I'm supposed to trust him with national security, well, I'm sure he's very trustworthy on that. He's just not trustworthy with the woman who bore him children. Like the people don't make any connection between these things. They say, oh, well, that's totally separate. How is it totally separate? If you're a trustworthy person and you don't lie, you don't do that throughout your whole life. You don't just say, oh, well, America is more important than my family. I would never lie for America, but I would lie to the mother of my children.
Yeah, no.
Just a lot of cope from some trads, unfortunately, about President Trump.
Yeah, it's amazing what some rose-colored glasses can, and that's actually a good way to talk about even the gurus. Like, even if you like someone, they're not a saint, they're not perfection. There is a case of they're just people doing their thing who might be good at something that you can learn from, and then you just have to be careful and just be appropriate on how you manage your intake. I think it's a really good. I don't know what it is, but I call it the Messiah syndrome. The Messiah syndrome, I think I might call that. Basically, when people feel that, like, if they like someone or learn from someone, they have to be like the Messiah or something. You know, President Trump's going to save us. It's like, right. What if he's just a politician who's doing his thing? Like, and he's, like, it's literally just as simple as he's just a dude. Like, come on.
Right.
All right. Cool.
Is that it for our guru list? We'll just circle back to the chat went on a little further without us, but just to give more context, talking about Vatican II, and that I told my nephew about sedevacantism, he won't concede. And once again, this is why I'm telling you, don't make it about Catholicism. He may not lead you on that, but you can make an argument on the practical order. You and he are equals on that. You can say, this is how much money it costs. How are the jobs? And he can't then say, oh, well, I believe in Vatican II, and so I reject your argument. You can say, do you not believe in math? Do you not believe in statistics? Do you not believe in that person that I sent you to talk to who's been in psychiatry for 2 years and says he regrets it? Those are the compelling arguments. And keep in mind, your nephew could still choose to be stupid and reject all of this. You also have to be at peace and say, I've done everything I can. But if he's rose-colored glasses about the Novus Ordo, that's one of the hardest battles to fight. Fight an easy battle using statistics and using money. I think that's an easier battle to fight than will he concede on sedevacantism and being involved in a Vatican II church that worships psychology. I don't think you're going to win that battle.
And on that, just to finish up, if you're going to read one book based on that Irish Breakfast, I'll just put in, talking about your nephew, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. That's one book that you will definitely want to read because that will help your effectiveness in persuasion.
Negotiation, persuasion.
Yeah. Negotiation and persuasion. So that's the book I would read if that's what you're asking yourself. Cool. Thank you, Stephen. Anything else to add before we wrap up?
No, we're a little bit over on time, but I think we finally got the gurus and most of the books covered off. And maybe next time we'll finish up the book list with personal development, as well as any questions from today's stream and maybe previous streams that we haven't got to. And that might actually be the end of our business series, Matthew. We might be able to allow TR Live to move on to other things.
Yeah, I know. And thank you to the audience. And yes, to the audience again, you can put questions into this after it's live. You can put your comments into the YouTube comments and we'll have a look at them. And then we can address those questions in a later live stream. Thank you, everyone.